Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast. Now, this one is actually a vodcast, which will be transformed into a podcast on the Bet Rivers Network, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. As always, Casamigo Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. This is our second voyage on the Mike Francesa channel on the Bet Rivers Network on YouTube. And as I've told you before, we are going to do these periodically through the summer. And then we will start to make these live shows in the fall once football is back and we have a regular schedule. We will start to make these live programs a very big staple of what we bring you. So get used to it. And we will also be able to, as we still enhance the technology, which we are working on right now, we will be able to bring you comments on the screen from listeners and viewers. We will also be able to have guests, and we will also, I believe, eventually be able to take calls. We are still working on that technology right now. Now, we begin the day, of course, as everyone would expect, with the passing of Willie Mays. For those who listen to me and listen to Mike and the Mad Dog through the years, and then listen to me all the years I worked after Dog left, most of the conversations that dealt with Willie in conjunction or in comparison to usually Mickey Mantle. This is about Willie and his place in baseball history, which is not only secure, it is obviously very special. Where you might fall as to where Willie ranks, we all know that nobody would argue that he is among the handful of the greatest players of all time. Some would call him the greatest player of all time. That is always open to debate. I didn't see Babe Ruth play. I didn't see Ty Cobb play. I didn't see Joe DiMaggio play. I did see Willie Mays play numerous occasions. I saw him play when he still could play with the San Francisco Giants in person. I saw him later with the Mets when he couldn't play. Okay, as all players have those late moments in their career, usually. Very few, other than the great DiMaggio, maybe Sandy Koufax, very few did not have those days because they left the stage too early. But most did. There's no question that when you think about what a superstar player can bring, the 5 tools he can bring to the baseball game, okay, as a position player: hit for average, hit for power, run, field, throw. Willie Mays had no weakness. He could do them all. And when you add them all up, he ranks with the very best. He was a better defensive player than he was offensive player. He was a terrific offensive player, especially when you incorporate his base running. Now, there were better hitters than Mays. I don't think anybody would argue that, would have a problem with that. But when you incorporate his offense, his defense, and his base running, plus his flair and the way he pushed the envelope in the way he played, there's no question he ranks as one of the greatest players of all time. He had a very long career. He was able to carry his talents effectively to 40 years of age. He was still good in those years. While a guy like Mantle was done at 34, Mays wasn't done till 40. So he was able to, he took better care of himself, and he had a better body in terms of longevity than Mantle did. There's no question about it. And those two are linked forever in history because they came up together, they played the same position, and they were among the most exciting, most talented players of all time. And they are linked forever in history. And I don't think either one would have a problem being linked to the other. Although Mantle always said Willie was a better player than he was. Mantle never disputed that Willie was a better all-around player. With Mantle's injuries, his defense suffered. He wasn't he wasn't the defensive player he had the talents to be because of his knee problems and his leg problems. And then his shoulder problems once he had the collision with Red Shandies, he had a big problem with his throwing arm after that. So all that was an issue. And Mays defensively was utterly brilliant. Utterly brilliant. No one can question that. And he was a dynamic base runner. So, listen, I don't get into the disputes as to, whether, to me, whether Babe Ruth or Willie Mays are better all-around player or Ty Cobb is a silly argument. There's no way to compare them. There's no way to compare what Cobb did to what Ruth did to what Mays did. So why even bother? So if you like him there, then put him there. If you think he was the best all-around player, then put him there. No one's going to dispute that. He ranks at the very top as an all-around player. No one's going to dispute what he brought to the game. It's funny that it just shows you that certain players have certain showcases. Mantle's showcase was the World Series. Mays' showcase was the All-Star Game. Now, he wasn't as fortunate to be on the teams Mantle was. Plus, he didn't have a lot of success in October. But the All-Star Game was where he always loved to shine. And it was very important for him to shine at that level and to make that All-Star Game. I think some players go to the All-Star Game and they're not very interested. He went to the All-Star Game and it was a very big thing for him. And it was his showcase. And that's what people like to remember. And he was always terrific in that game. Absolutely terrific. So he was blessed with a very long life. Lived to the age of 93. Had an incredible, legendary, incredible baseball career. We just lost two players who had incredible careers. Jerry West in basketball. Willie Mays in baseball. And for as long as they bounce a ball, they will remember Jerry Weston. And for as long as they throw a baseball and hit a baseball, they will remember Willie Mays, as it should be. So as he goes to his resting place, hey, he goes there secure, having built a legacy that will live forever. There's no question about that. Now, back to on the field, a tremendous come-from-behind win for the Mets last night. When I saw the score, I was watching the hockey game, and we'll get to that in a minute, because that's gotten interesting. The Mets come from 6-2 back and win the game. Diaz locks it up in the ninth inning. The leadoff guy got on with a single. You're saying, oh, boy, let's see if Diaz is in trouble. Gets a double play, gets out of the game. Good night. So the Mets now have really turned things around. Now, the question is, will they actually get to that 500 mark or through it before they cool off? We know they're going to cool off. They've won 10 out of 12. They've won 7 in a row. For this team, that is and with this kind of pitching, this is a very long winning streak. And when you're coming from 6-2 down on the road, that's, you're playing really good baseball. You're playing inspired baseball. And the Mets are right now. Now, the amazing thing is what's happened with this wild card, which was put in so that baseball did not turn the sport over to football after Labor Day, so that they had something to give the public and have the public be interested in, even if you had a runaway winner in the division. And you can look at it. There are right now in the National League, if you take the second and the third wild card, there are 9 teams within a game and a half of the 2 wild cards. 9 teams. Can you imagine a summer into the early fall where you have 9 teams battling for 2 spots? That's what baseball wants. It keeps the sport alive in all those cities. And that's what they're trying to do. And you know what? Met fans won't care if they're in that race and they're 500. Hey, who cares? Who cares if you're 10 over or you're even? Doesn't make any difference. If you can get there, you get there. And if you can get there, who knows what happens? Look at last year. So right now they're there. And as you head towards next week's Subway Series and head towards the 4th of July and head towards the All-Star break and then the idea of whether you are a buyer or a seller, could the Mets actually be buyers as they try to see if they can make something of this summer and actually make a run at this wild card, which is wide open to everybody? It's a different way to look at the Mets. And they'll help answer that in the next couple of weeks. And right now, the way they're playing, if they can hold this form until next Tuesday, this will be a very, very exciting and interesting couple of days for the Yankees and Mets next week at Citi Field on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Now, the Yankees opened what will be a summer of the Orioles last night, got the first blow, and there's a little tension already. So if you like the idea that you want to stir things up between the Yankees and the Orioles, well, they stirred them up last night by plunking a couple of guys, including Judge. Now, the word on Judge is very good. No breaks, no problems. He has a very good chance to even be in the lineup this evening. So he didn't get injured. He didn't suffer any damage that was going to put him on the shelf. He continues to play and play on an exceedingly special level. And he could be back in the lineup tonight. And now you have the Yankees a little miffed at what's going on with the Orioles, who have clearly thrown inside, taking over for the Red Sox throwing inside on the Yankees. So here we go. And we'll see how this develops. Going forward, we will see how this develops in the next couple of days as this rivalry between a young Oriole team, which is just coming into its own, which obviously has had its own injuries this year to its pitching staff, which still has probably a little bit of stars in their eyes when they see the Yankees. And now the Yankees a little miffed by the way the Orioles approached things last night. So Yankees draw first blood. Orioles want to respond. Yankees a little miffed about getting thrown out a little bit last night and then working the heater inside. Well, we'll see how that manifests itself this evening and tomorrow. Tomorrow's a 4 o'clock game against the Orioles, but it just makes what will be a Yankee-Oriole summer a little more exciting. Puts a little more sizzle, a little more, a little more temper, a little more intensity into the rivalry. Now, I mentioned that Edmonton. I was watching a hockey game last night. I've been interested. I've been into the Panthers. I was impressed by the Panthers against the Rangers. Obviously, I've watched them take the 3-0 lead. Edmonton couldn't score. Their big star couldn't score. And then all of a sudden, they flicked the switch. 8-1, come back last night, opened the game. First team ever to get back-to-back first scores on shorthanded goals. Obviously sent a statement, got out to a lead, got a bigger lead. It got to 4-3. They had to hang on. Empty net. Boom. Back to Edmonton. 2,500 miles back across. It's a long trip. I remember, and I even mentioned this yesterday before this game was played, how the Rangers against Vancouver, we spent Game 5 talking about how to celebrate once the Rangers had done the inevitable and won the series and finally slayed the dragon and finally, they had their cup, and how they would celebrate and how they would, how the fans would deal with it. And what happened? Vancouver went out and beat them in Game 5. Dog and I made the trek back to Vancouver for Game 6. It was my second trip, Dog's third trip to Vancouver in that series. And we went from there, Game 6, to Houston for Game 6 for the Knicks. The NBA was running behind it, as it did in those days. Now the NHL is actually behind the NBA. First, didn't used to be that way. But we went to Vancouver for Game 6. And I've mentioned many times how crazy it was there for Game 6. The intensity before the game, the celebration after the game that spilled out into the streets, the cars all honking their horns, everybody waving their white towels. I mean, people on top of cars, rocking buses, I mean, going crazy. It was a wild scene, like they had won something. It was such an accomplishment for them to force a Game 7. And with it, as that trek came back, so the big trip to Vancouver, and then the long trip back to New York, that could happen easily in this series. I would be surprised if it doesn't happen, where if Edmonton goes now home, wins their Game 6, as most people will expect them to, come back now, another trek across the entire country. No two teams have ever been so far divided by miles in a championship series. Back again, and the pressure building on Florida, which was up 3-0 in this series, and now could be facing a Game 7. So, any way you cut it, if that happens, the pressure with each win energizes Edmonton because they were left for dead. When you're down 3-0, you're left for dead. And now they have it to 3-2. And they believe. And they have their offense going. And they have their big man going, who has now put a flurry of points up in the last 2 games, a record number of points up in the last 2 games. So they believe they have figured things out. Now does Florida feel the same way? And if they do, the series becomes very tough. And, hey, should Edmonton win Game 6 and then force the Game 7, the pressure coming back will be enormous on Florida. Absolutely enormous. Not to have this happen. Now, we've seen it happen. It's happened already in hockey. We know that it's happened in baseball. We all lived through it. Still one of the more remarkable things we ever experienced. Because the Yankees were, they were 3 outs away in Game 4. They had a 2-run lead late in Game 5. And they blew both those games. And by the time they got back to New York, they were in pitching hell, and the Red Sox were ready with Schilling and his bloody sock in Game 6. And then, of course, Game 7, which was 8-0 after 2 innings, after the Johnny Damon Grand Slammer. And the Red Sox were on their way to finally slaying the Dragon and becoming the first baseball team ever to do it, and then sweeping the World Series and winning a World Series and winning a bunch more since. More than the Yankees have. So that has been quite telling. And this series might turn out to be very telling too. But it's clearly very dramatic to watch now. No question about it. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to watch this unfold. Now, I told you yesterday about a new promotion that Bet Rivers has as we head into the baseball summer. The Bet Rivers MLB midweek same game parlay profit boost. Now, add more value to the midweek MLB slate with the Bet Rivers midweek same game parlay profit boost. Each Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, log into the Bet Rivers app, claim your profit boost, and then apply it to the same game parlay of odds of $100 or longer. Each leg must be minus 200 or longer odds to qualify for the promotion. Depending on your loyalty level, you'll get a boost of at least 25% and maybe as much as 100%. 100%. It's the BetRivers MLB midweek same-game parlay profit boost. Visit the BetRivers app for full details and get your midweek same-game parlay boost. I've started already looking at the over-under numbers. I actually circled one that this early. I circled one that I liked. And that's early. I mean, we have a ways to go to even get to camp, but I actually circled one very early. Now, it's interesting. I know that there's been a lot of rumblings about whether or not the two foreign players will go 1-2 in the NBA draft. And Klingon will have to wait because a lot of the teams that are on the board that have early picks don't need a big man. But there was talk of teams trading in, maybe even trading into the top, with Atlanta moving the pick and Klingon being picked number 1, which I think could still happen. Now, the interesting thing is you have the two foreign players then, the two forwards, who everyone has at the top there. And then you have Reed Sheppard from Kentucky, who has dazzled them and will go very high. And Castle from UConn, who's going to be among the top 6 players and maybe even the top 5 players picked. I think he could go to San Antonio. I think San Antonio wants to take either Sheppard or Castle as they start to build a, championship team around their prodigy. So the two UConn players, Klingon and Castle, are going to go probably in the top 5. Now, as I said, the only reason Klingon might go a little lower is there's not a lot of teams that need a big man that are actually stationed in the draft right now. But there could be a lot of movement there. So we'll see how that unfolds. So imagine UConn with 2 players. You wonder why they were so good. They're 2 players that are going to be high lottery picks. And really explains part of their prowess, which, as we talked about last week, is one of the real special performances we've seen over the last 2 years. One of the best teams in NCAA tournament history. Now, some emails. And remember, you send your emails to MikeFrancesa@gmail.com. We haven't done emails a lot lately, so let's get a couple in. Here we go. Greg starts us off. What grade would you give Met manager Mendoza so far this season? I was worried about him when they were playing really badly. I was wondering, he wasn't showing anything. And he's got a very quiet, kind of confident way about him. That you can see that he would be easy to get along with. And I don't know him very well, never spent a lot of time with him. But I think he's handled things very well. And, they've made a lot of subtle changes as they've gone through this. They've made changes in a lot of places very subtly. Now, some of that's front office, a lot of it's him. Remember that that the analytics department has a say in all this stuff. The Stearns has a say in all this stuff, and they work in conjunction. But he seems like he's fit very well. And right now, as they're rolling, he has. Now, I think there's some things he's done with the bullpen. And listen, if you watch any team every day, you're going to question some of the pitching moves. That's all there is to it. It wouldn't be logical if you didn't. You're not going to agree with every pitching move. There's just no way. There's sometimes you would have stayed with a guy. There's sometimes you wouldn't. You would have gone and get a guy. So that goes with any manager. But he had to deal with this Diaz thing. He did. He's had to deal with inefficiency at certain positions, and he's made changes. You know, they looked like they were going to make a big stand around Beatty early in the season, and now, obviously, that's all changed with the way that Vientos was hit. They had to deal with the injury at catcher. They had to wait for Martinez, who has been a big deal. They had to live through the slumps of Lindor, and then Alonso's had a couple of them. Even Nimmo. So I think he's handled things well so far. And right now, it's a very easy time because they've won 10 out of 12. They've won 7 in a row, and they are playing their best baseball by a wide margin. Bernard asked, what are the chances the Knicks re-sign both OG and Isaiah Hartenstein? Unlikely. Listen, OG's going nowhere. As I've said to you many times, the Knicks went to one level with Hart. They went to another level with OG. What he brings, how he fits in, his defensive versatility and prowess, what he can bring offensively, he fits perfectly. They would love to keep Isaiah. They would love to keep him. His development, and I would rather have him than have Robinson. And I like Robinson, but here's the thing about Robinson. Robinson is injured all the time. He's a good rebounder and a good defender, but he kills the offense. Hartenstein does everything well, and he moves the offense through himself very well, either as a passer or as a guy who can throw that little, flip in the lane into the basket. So I really like how he fits in. Now, the problem is he's going to get a bundle of money this year. He's going to get money that's going to have you say, are you kidding me? He got that much money? That's what happens with these guys. So I don't think they're going to be able to keep him. I think OG stays. I think, unfortunately, he goes. John, does the Doncic complaining to the officials bother you? It drives me crazy. Listen, I've watched many great players whine to the officials. Oscar Robinson did it all the time. Rick Barry did it all the time. I can give you so many guys who just were, classic whiners to officials. I don't mind that. What I do mind is when he is whining to the officials and his defense is playing 4-on-5. That I have a problem with. When he's on the ground and he's pouting or he's yelling at an official and they're getting a dunk the other way because they're 4-on-5, that's nonsense. And his defense stinks as it is on a regular basis. So to have him pulling that stuff, I don't like. So the answer to your question is yes, it bothers me. Mike asks, what has happened to Nimmo? He used to be an on-base machine. Now, all he does is strike out. Well, that's not always true. He's gone through some rough patches. I actually think, I'm going to tell you honestly what I think it is. I think it has to do with what they did with the batting order and the fact he's trying to hit home runs. I don't think there's any question. He's much more concerned right now with trying to hit home runs. So that has changed his approach. Now, whether they asked him to do that, whether they want him to do that, whether that's him doing that, he clearly has tried to tried to accentuate the power part of his game at the expense of other parts of his game. So I think that's what you're saying. And that is clear. That is clearly happening. I don't think there's any question that's happening. Jason. A lot of Met questions. with where the Mets stand right now in the wild card standings, and like I said, if you look at the last two wild cards and then go down to just a game and a half out, 9 teams from the first of those two wild cards through the teams that are within a game and a half, 9 teams in the National League. Could you see Stearns and Cohen being buyers rather than sellers? Yes, I absolutely can. I don't think they're going to break the bank, nor do they have to. Can I see them adding? Listen, let's be honest. If they want to be serious about this, they need to add some starting pitching. Can they get by with their offense? They can. Their offense will be okay, especially if he hits at third base, especially if Marte continues what he's done lately. You don't worry about Lindor and Martinez. Lindor is now up to 240-something, and he's got his OPS around 750, so he's starting to rebound. Alonso hasn't had a great year, but you know he's going to hit, and you know he's going to hit for power. It's just automatic. So I do think they would need to do it in the pitching department, which is not easy to do. But could they be buyers rather than sellers, considering where this stuff is? Yes, and that's exactly what the league wants. That's exactly what baseball wants. They want there to be a host of teams within hailing distance, in distance of that last wild card, where it keeps that city alive after Labor Day and not give away the sport after Labor Day. Which, if you look at right now, and you look at the division races, other than the Yankees and the Orioles, Cleveland has a 6-game lead in the loss column. Seattle has a 9-game lead in the loss column. Philly has a 7-game lead in the loss column. Milwaukee has a 6-game lead in the loss column. And the Dodgers have a 8-game lead in the loss column. So you have substantial distance in almost all those divisions, while the Yankees and the Orioles are just one apart in the loss column. The Yankees moved ahead last night, 24-25, with the win over the Orioles last night. And Holmes, again, I worry about him. But clearly, when you look at that wild card right now in the National League, Atlanta has 5 who are going to play better. All right? They're going to play better. And they have a 5-game lead in the wild card. They don't have to catch the Phillies, but they have a 5-game lead in the wild card. And then you have St. Louis, Arizona, right now, a half game in front. And then you have San Francisco, the Mets, Washington, San Diego, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Chicago within a game and a half. All those teams. That is significant. That is quite telling. Jesse wraps up the emails with best of 7. 96 Bulls. Okay. 2,000 Lakers. Who wins? Best of 7. Bulls. Bulls were an exceptionally hard matchup and a tremendous defensive team. Tremendous defensive team. They win. They were a very hard team. And then you know that you have 2 very unusual players. You have the all-around player Pippen and his defensive prowess, and then Jordan's offensive prowess and his ability to just take over the game in the fourth quarter. like no one else has ever done. So that's the difference. Remember, you can send your emails to Mike Francesa Podcast at gmail.com. Mike Francesa Podcast at gmail.com. And we told you we're going to do these live shows through the summer periodically. One a week. If we're off a week, we'll come back the next week with one. And the Mike Francesa channel on the Bet Rivers Network on YouTube. Then in the fall, this will become a staple of what we're going to provide. So we will do live programming a lot once we get past Labor Day. A lot. And we will feature guests, and we will feature comments, and we will eventually get to some calls. So all that to come. So keep looking for it on the YouTube network, Mike Francesa channel, on the Bet Rivers Network, on YouTube. And don't forget the Bet Rivers app for all of your wagering needs and all your NFL stuff and all the college football stuff and all the preview stuff that you're looking for there, futures, everything else that's going on, who's going to win the national championship in college football, your over-unders in the NFL, and everything else that's going on there. Before you know it, right around the corner. We'll see you later.